Hello, everyone, and welcome to our event this evening. My name is Raymond Miller, and I am the Undergraduate Recruitment Officer for Queen's here. Today's event, Mental Health and Wellbeing, Enjoying the Journey. So it's a really good event for you to be joining us in today, and we hope that you'll really get something out of it. There'll be a number of different ways in which you can interact with the event. So one will be through a couple of polls that we're going to run. So I'm going to run a poll now where you'll be able to click and answer that. So hopefully you should see that poll coming up. The other thing you'll be able to do is chat to us at the end of the session. And if somebody could just let me know now in the chat box that you can hear me okay and you can see what's going on, that would be really, really helpful. So you can fire that into the chat box to make sure you can hear me. So like I say, you can interact through the polls. You can also interact through the questions at the end. And then there'll be a few exercises throughout it, which our speaker tonight, Dr. Carolyn Blair, will be able to talk you through later. And before I introduce Carolyn, I just want to tell you a bit about her. So she used to work for Aware NI, which is the mental health support charity in Northern Ireland. And she's now a research fellow here at Queen's for the School of Social Sciences, Education and Social Work. So without further ado, I'll just welcome Carolyn.
Super. Thank you so much, Raymond. It's a privilege as ever to be co-delivering with you tonight. And yeah, an absolute privilege to be here. And an interesting topic. And I'm just watching the poll with one eye here and in regards to how we're all feeling tonight, and whether it be feeling stressed, feeling anxious, being in lockdown, my own self-esteem, getting motivated. And it's a tricky time at the minute for everybody. And obviously, given the restrictions with lockdown, it certainly can add to that feeling of anxiety and loneliness. And also, obviously, the big decisions that are coming up in regards to the future obviously cause a little bit of increased stress as well. And that's what hopefully we're going to address tonight. And please feel free to put anything in the chat at all that you want to ask. And obviously, as Raymond has indicated, it's all entirely private. So and your name won't be attached to it. So it's certainly feel free to do that. So what we're obviously looking at, as Raymond has shared tonight, is mental health and well-being, and how we can enjoy the journey a little more. So we know that making decisions about our future is stressful, and that's evidently a fact. And what we also know is that mindfulness practice can help us to overcome indecision and reduce that negative self-chat that can really stress us out. And this is my background in mindfulness-based practice as a practitioner. I was the coordinator in Aware and also the interim lead there. And it's something that I was introduced to actually while I was the lead for Mind Your Mood, as I'm sure some of you might be aware of. It's a campaign in Queen's. And ever since then, I have started to practice back then when I was sent in a course to test it out for students, actually. And it's been something that's been really helpful in my life, just to lower my anxiety levels and also to help me to feel more present and more able actually to make decisions as well, because I'm connecting with my body. So hopefully we'll be able to explain a little more about it today, and I hope that will be helpful for you too. So what we know is that enjoying the journey is important. And as I'm sure you've heard this before, that happiness is an inside job. And maybe if we did a poll today on, does anybody want to be a little bit more happy? Now, I'd be very surprised if we didn't get up in the 90s in regards to responses there from everybody, because most of us want to enjoy our lives and have a little more happiness in our lives. Even if we are relatively content. So what we know is that developing skills and mindfulness can support more intrinsic forms of motivation. This really means inside types of motivation. We get the extrinsic forms of motivation, which are really motivated through either rewards or punishment, but intrinsic is really stemming from curiosity, a sense of desire to know more about the topic. And that's really what we're thinking about tonight as well in our presentation. But it doesn't mean that if we focus on these sort of internal curiosity, passion type motivations, it doesn't mean that extrinsic type rewards don't come our way. And hopefully what we're talking about here will become a little clearer as we go on. So what actually is mindfulness, and is it really relevant to enjoying the journey? And you might be aware, but there's a little bit of skepticism about mindfulness. And on that note, a mate of mine many years ago bought me the Ladybird book of mindfulness. And I looked at it and thought, what under goodness is this a sort of a helpful guide to mindfulness here? But little did I know she was being a little skeptical about it. And anyway, on the initial couple of pages of it, it says that Alison has been staring at this beautiful tree for 5 hours. She was meant to be in the office. Tomorrow she'll be fired. In this way, mindfulness will have solved her work-related stress. So obviously what we can take from this, that some people poke fun at mindfulness, which they're entirely entitled to do, in the sense that how and under goodness could sitting in silence be helpful to achieving your goals. But as I say, as we go through tonight, I hope that it'll become a little clearer as to how it can help lower our anxiety levels and our stress levels and help us to actually make decisions. So one of the key players in the mindfulness realm, and really the main initiator of mindfulness-based stress reduction, is Jon Kabat-Zinn. And his working definition of mindfulness is that mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So really, essentially what we're doing is trying to really be in the present moment, and without that sense of judgment or critical thoughts of ourselves. And that's also important when it comes to making decisions. So what we're going to cover tonight, and we are sort of racing a little bit against time, so apologies if I'm going quite quickly, but we're trying to get this fitted in within 25 to 30 minutes. So what you need, you already actually have. And that's a wonderful thing about this, that through practice and presence, we can manage fear. Through practice and acceptance, we can manage avoidance. Through practice and courage, we can manage this negative self-appraisal. And when we talk about negative self-appraisal, this just means critical thoughts, that inner voice that we all have telling us that we're not good enough, that we can't do it, that who are you to think you can do this? All those types of comments and thoughts that we can have. This is essentially what we're trying to manage. So fear. What's really the problem with fear? I'm sure that most of us will have seen the David Attenborough style nature programs where we see the antelope in the distance, and then all of a sudden its head comes up, you see the whites of its eyes, and then the camera pans around and you see a lion, and you know what's going to happen. So the antelope starts to run, and there's a herd of them, and then the lion follows. If it's his lucky day, he'll get some lunch, and then the antelope find a safe place and start to eat grass or such like again. What we see is that they look around, all of a sudden they think, right, okay, the threat has reduced here, and they go back to what was normal for them. But unfortunately for us as humans, that it's a little bit different. Whenever we feel exceptionally scared, and especially on a repeated basis, that this can bear a real brunt on our minds, in the sense that we can end up overthinking things and ruminating and ending up feeling especially scared about things that maybe we have no reason to be scared about. And we're not talking by any means about any kind of traumatic events, but rather just normal everyday occurrences. So fear, managing fear through presence, how does that work? Okay, and hopefully again, it'll become clear. So what we know is that we have these reactions, the flight reaction, a freeze reaction, and a fight reaction. And we will be more prone to one of these reactions than others. Flight, we run away from situations when we feel scared. Freeze, we just feel entirely numb. Or fight, we get aggressive and we react all of a sudden and maybe do things and say things that we later regret. So through our mindfulness practice, what we're really doing here essentially is anchoring ourselves through our breath to the present moment. And what we know is that the parts of the brain that are functioning here is our prefrontal cortex mainly, and our amygdala. Dan Siegel has an interesting type of an illustration he uses whenever he explains what's happening to the brain under threat. And he calls it the handy model of the brain. Hopefully you can see my wee thumbnail picture in the corner there. Uses this as the amygdala, okay, pushing this in. This is our amygdala here. Then the four fingers wrap round. That's the prefrontal cortex. Whenever we feel stress, this here's the brain stem. Whenever we feel this intense stress, what happens is we can flip the lid. With our mindfulness practice, what we know is through neuroscientific evidence that the prefrontal cortex actually thickens. So it's not that the amygdala changes size, or the amygdalae, there's two of them, but rather whenever we feel threat and stress, what actually happens is that we can be more contained. So rather than flipping our lid, we're actually more contained. And that's why we talk about the ABCs of mindfulness. A, bigger container. If I was in the room with you now, I would demonstrate running across the room with a glass of water. And if I ran across a room with a glass of water, what would happen? Obviously, it would probably spill out from side to side. But if I poured the same glass into a jug, what would happen? It would stay contained. And that's essentially what we're trying to achieve here, a sense of containment. So we know that whenever we're feeling this fight reaction or flight reaction, we're in this state of hyperarousal. And when we get into the freeze mode where we don't know what to do, we can't even think clearly at all, we're in a state of hypoarousal. So essentially what we're trying to do is to expand this window of tolerance that we have so that we can actually take on more. Not that we deliberately go out and ask for more stress, but the natural progression of life is we're advancing in our career, we're advancing to university. It can be stressful. So we need to have a good window of tolerance to be able to deal with it. And that's essentially what we're trying to do through mindfulness practice. And that helps us to expand this window. And it means there's other means of doing this, even listening to music, engaging in hobbies, etc. It's not saying by any means that mindfulness is the only way, but it's one such technique that can be helpful. So if we're not present, where in fact are we? We're either in the past or we're in the future. So in the past, we're maybe worrying about something that has happened or something we said. If we're in the future, maybe we're thinking, oh, I feel so fearful about this, I don't know what to do. That doesn't mean or doesn't detract from the need to reflect in circumstances or forward plan by any means. But sometimes we can spend a lot of time wasted on really remembering things from the past that we regret, or looking into the future fearfully. So why is being present so important to making decisions? Essentially, it's so important because what we're doing here is moving from the thinking brain, just continually thinking and trying to work things out, to sensing. Okay, so it's bringing the two together is actually what makes the difference. It's not saying that our cognitive patterns or cognitive thoughts don't have any bearing on our decisions. Of course they do. But whenever we connect with our body, we can really feel what's going on in our body. And as Bessel van der Kolk says, the body does keep the score. So we need to be in touch and in tune with what's happening in our body. And what we know is that we can train our mind in order to shape our brain, just like this brain here in the corner. This is what the neuroscientific hard evidence tells us, that through brain training, we can, or through mind training, we can actually reshape our brains. And that gives a wonderful sense of hope. If you're thinking, oh, I feel so anxious all the time, that is certainly a good technique that we can use, okay? So how do we increase our awareness? So good techniques to increase our awareness is just to actually focus on the senses, to pay attention to our senses, the sense of touch, even smell and taste and sight, even our hearing. Whenever we're We're even listening to the birds singing, being in tune with what's going on around us as well as in our bodies can help us to stay present. As John Kabat-Zinn says here, when awareness embraces the senses, it enlivens them. We're going to do a very brief meditation here together, if that's okay, and it's just a couple of minutes. So what we're going to do is get into what's called a mountain posture, and if you feel comfortable, please close your eyes. If you want to keep them open, that's absolutely fine as well. So what we're essentially going to do is just focus on our breath and focus on the senses as well. So taking a breathing space, making a definite change in your posture so that it embodies a sense of being awake. Beginning by seeing what's going on in your mind and your body right now. Just noticing what the weather pattern's like inside. What thoughts are around. What feelings are here. Just noticing any sensations in the body. Not trying to change anything, but just opening up to what's already here. You turn your attention to sounds. Just noticing what you hear. Without any need to label or without following that train of thought. Just noticing. Now bringing the attention to the breath. Just narrowing that spotlight of attention to any sensations you feel in your abdomen. Just tuning in to the change in physical sensations that you feel. Now expanding the focus of your awareness around the breath to take in the whole body. As if the whole body was breathing right now. Aware of your posture, your facial expressions. Any sensations in the surface of your skin from right inside your body. Just noticing, just as they are. Coming home to your body and coming home to this moment. And just whenever you're ready, if you had your eyes closed, feel free to open them. It's just a short example, and we are sort of beating the clock tonight, so apologies for the brevity of this, but it's a short example of a meditation and what it feels like if you've never practiced before. But there's longer meditations that you can access online, body scan type meditations and awareness meditations that can be also helpful to centering us to the present moment and helping us to develop that presence to manage fear. So avoidance. What is the problem with avoidance? What we know is that avoidance increases stress. Just like the snowball rolling down the hill, the snowball of anxiety, that it starts off very small, but it rolls down the hill with great momentum and it enlarges in size. So what we know is that if we avoid things that we must deal with, that it actually increases this anxiety. And as Carl Jung says, what you resist not only persists, but it will grow in size. So therefore, instead of turning away from problems, we turn towards them, and we teach ourselves and we train ourselves to turn towards them. And through expanding that window of tolerance, we can actually manage the emotions that this unsettles inside of us, that we can contain it, just as we spoke about a little earlier. So what we know is that non-avoidance and non-attachment, and by non-attachment, we just mean that we're not clinging to the outcomes of things. We get acceptance, okay? So through non-avoidance and non-attachment, this brings us to acceptance. So what actually is acceptance? Mindfulness is simply being aware of what's happening right now without wishing it were different. Enjoying the pleasant without holding on when it changes, which it will. Being with the unpleasant without fearing it will always be this way, which it won't. Okay, so it's being able to sit with emotions essentially is what acceptance means. And some people think, oh, acceptance, is that a passive state? Does that just mean I lie down to anything? But rather, no. It means welcome thoughts, feelings, and emotions, but you're not welcome to walk all over me. It certainly doesn't mean by any shape or form or fashion that we become a doormat. Rather, we become accepting of the emotions that we feel. Rather, we can become more responsive in a much more educated way, in a sense that we know what's going on inside our body and we can respond to circumstances in a way that normally we don't regret. So acceptance is an active state. We turn towards instead of turning away from these inner experiences that we feel, but we're also non-judgmental in this. So what we also know is that when we practice mindfulness, that it's not that we don't experience these emotions, rather we do, but we're able to recover much more quickly than if we didn't. So how? We use our breath as an anchor to the present moment. And I used to use a snow globe whenever I was working with kids in schools to demonstrate that whenever you shake up a snow globe, it's a bit like our emotions when we become unsettled or something frightens us. But if we leave the snow globe to settle, what happens is the snow all drifts to the bottom and we can see the object clearly in the center of the snow globe. And this is what it's like through anchoring ourselves to the present moment through our breath, that the emotions settle down and we can think clearly and we can respond clearly. And the little acronym that I would use myself is STOP. So stop, take a breath, observe and proceed. So what we know, even from this cartoon here, is that the key to meditation is learning to stay. And if you've ever taught a puppy how to stay, what we know is that it's difficult. And you can see the puppy running off and going to the bin and going to maybe the laundry basket and dragging out all sorts of things. And that can be a bit like our minds, that we can, when we say, okay, I'm going to stay focused on this, then all of a sudden we go off to the bin and we drag something back in our minds and we're presented with this thought and we think, where in under goodness did that come from? So mindfulness is really focusing ourselves on the present moment, and we can really, I suppose, imagine why this is so critically important to making good decisions. So what Brené Brown says is one of my favorite authors. It's not specifically mindfulness related, but it's he or she who's willing to be the most uncomfortable can rise strong. Okay, so being able to sit with these uncomfortable emotions, maybe a bit like uncertainty or fear, this can be critical in us making good decisions. So we're going to do a brief acceptance meditation together, okay? And through this meditation, what I'm going to be asking is that you bring to mind something that you're maybe worrying a little bit about. So just being prepared to bring that to mind. Okay, so just again, getting into our mountain posture. And if it feels comfortable to you, closing your eyes. So again, just bringing your attention to the breath for a moment. Noticing that cool air as you breathe in. And the warmer air as you breathe out. Just noticing the sensations in your body and just using your breath as that anchor to the present moment. Now bring into your mind a current situation in which you feel be a little stuck, maybe a little uncertain. Just taking some moments to enter into that experience, just visualizing the scene, situation. As you reflect on this, just asking yourself gently, what's happening inside me right now? What sensations am I most aware of? emotions. Maybe there might be thoughts popping into your mind. Just taking a moment to become aware of that felt sense, these circumstances as a whole. Just exploring a little further and ask yourself, what about this most wants my attention? What most wants my acceptance? Just posing your questions gently with your inner voice, kind and inviting. And just simply noticing where you feel the experience, or the thoughts and the emotions about the experience you've brought your attention to. Where do you feel them most distinctly in your body? Are you aware of any heat or tightness, pressure? You've felt this to its full, just allowing your attention to come back to the breath. Taking one big inhale. Again, just noticing that cool air as you inhale, warmer air as you exhale. And just when you're ready, opening up your eyes. It's not always easy to sit with uncomfortable emotions that we know that by nature we would rather avoid them. Any unpleasantness, avoid, please, is our natural reaction. But what we know is that we must process emotions in order to move on and to be able to make good decisions. So therefore, it's so important for us to actually practice acceptance. And what we know from our mindfulness practice is we have our sitting period of mindfulness as in our sitting meditation each day. Some people choose to do it for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. But we also have a practicing of attitudes, of acceptance, of curiosity, of kindness, of gratitude, of all these types of attitudes, which actually help us to develop a more mindful life. Okay, so negative self-appraisal, what is the problem here? Just a bit like the hamster in the wheel. What we know is that we can get stressed out about things and we can end up going round the block with thoughts. And that doesn't mean that we don't need to analyse circumstances and try to work them out and work out the best plan for the way ahead. But sometimes we can end up stuck in a feedback loop. We can end up a bit like on a rocking chair. We're moving, but we're not getting anywhere. So what we know is from the National Science Foundation that 80% of our thoughts are actually negative. We have 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts daily. And this is the most important one. 95% of our thoughts are exactly the same repetitive thoughts as we've had the day before. When I read this, I thought, what an under goodness, a waste of time here. It's unbelievable how much time we can waste thinking the same things as we thought yesterday and the day before and the day before that. So it really lies upon us to be able to take control of our minds in a sense and be able to practice ways in which we can manage these thoughts of either the past or the future that aren't actually serving us to be able to achieve our goals. So also this study from Cornell University is important because it says that 85% of what we worry about never happens, okay? And interestingly so, that 15% of the worries of the cohort of individuals that were studied in this, that 15% of the worries that they did have happened. And 79% of these subjects discovered that they could either handle the difficulty better than expected or the difficulty taught them a lesson worth learning. So the conclusion from this study was that 97% of our worries are baseless and result from an unfounded pessimistic perception, okay? So we can just get into a little bit of a habit of worrying. So being able to discipline ourselves to manage this negative self-appraisal can be also important when it comes to making decisions for our future. So how do we apply this, and how do we become a bit more courageous? It's very simple, that we show up. And it's not despite our imperfections, but it's rather that knowing that our vulnerability that makes us perfectly human. And by this, it's really knowing that every one of us has what we deem to be weaknesses. We all have vulnerabilities. So it's being able to embrace that in a way which is kind and inviting rather than harsh and self-critical. As Brené Brown says, that daring greatly is being brave and being afraid every minute of the day at the exact same time. By naturally, we'll feel fear. This is what we all feel whenever we're doing something new and making a decision that's going to affect the rest of our lives. It's natural to feel fear, but it is obviously part of the process of becoming more courageous as well. But being able to handle that fear is also important. So what's the link here between courage and confidence? And what we know is that the word courage comes from the Latin word cor, meaning heart. So in essence, what this means is being wholehearted. So it's a real holistic sense here when it comes to being courageous, that it's not just a head thing, but rather it's all our being is involved in being courageous. The word confidence comes from the Latin fidere, meaning to trust, a bit like good old Fido here, that the trusted friend. So essentially what we're doing is learning how to trust ourselves more. In practicing mindfulness, what we're doing is essentially taking responsibility for being ourselves and learning to listen to and trust our own being. So our intentions essentially set the stage for what's possible. And this is a core component of mindfulness practice, in essence, setting intentions. So just as we discussed earlier on, that our brain is a bit like a muscle that one can train through this sustained voluntary attention. So it's a discipline. We have to really practice this with the cultivation of attitudes, as we talked about a little before as well, and kindness, curiosity, compassion, gratitude. But also a core component of this is setting intentions. And really essentially what this means is that if we set intentions through self-regulation to self-exploration, meaning just that curiosity to explore our emotions, we get to this place of self-liberation, in the sense it's not some transcendent state by any means, but rather it's actually disidentifying from our perceived notion of self, that we maybe have a label over our head saying that, oh, I'm a failure, or whatever that may be. And we end up going, no, that actually isn't me. We disidentify from this label. And that's essentially what our practice helps us to do. So finally, and we're going to do a meditation for courage. And what we know is that courage requires intention. And as Theodore Roosevelt says here, that each time we face our fear, we gain strength and courage and confidence in the doing. And just similar to the last meditation, what we're doing is actually visualizing a circumstance in that we maybe something we really want to do, but we feel a little scared of doing it. Okay, so again, feel free to close your eyes, to keep them open, whatever is most comfortable for you. So again, just bringing your attention to the breath. Just anchoring yourself in the present moment. Noticing that cool air as you inhale. The warmer air as you exhale. Just noticing the sensations in your body. And just bringing to mind something that you have a moderate fear of doing. Something that you really want to have the courage to do. Just taking a moment to add some detail where you might be or who might be there. Just getting a real sense of what's happening in your body. What sensations are there? Now just recalling a time when you felt really courageous. If nothing's come to mind, even thinking about someone that you look to as being courageous. What is it about you or that person's posture, or breathing rhythm, sense of focus, determination, drive? It's holding that image. Using your breath as that anchor point to the present moment. Just holding the image, not just in your mind, but feeling it as much as you can in your body. Now, while holding these sensations you feel, just gently bringing back that image of what it is you want to overcome. Staying with your breathing, your anchor point. Just conscious of the duration of each breath from moment to moment. Noticing what you feel. Now just letting any imagery dissolve and bringing your attention to your breath, moving through your entire body. Whatever way feels natural for you. Mind just simply aware of this flow of breath through your body. Experiencing any sensations in your entire body breathing. So whenever you're ready, gently open your eyes. So essentially what we've covered here is about practicing presence and managing fear, practicing acceptance to manage avoidance, and practicing courage to manage this negative self-appraisal. And it's something that we can struggle with on a day in, day out basis. Maybe all of these things is potentially what we struggle with. So we do need to actively put strategies in place. And hopefully tonight's session has been helpful to be able to develop some strategies. Mindfulness is a tool. There's other tools out there. There's cognitive behavioral therapy as an example. But mindfulness practice is something that works personally for me. And I hope that it's been helpful for you tonight, just as a small flavor of what it's actually like. And some books here that you might be interested in, the Finding Peace in a Frantic World is in particularly good on mindfulness, a quick, easy read. Dan Goldman's Focus, to be able to develop that sense of focus and motivation, and Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. So finally, just as I sign off here, that as Mark Twain says, to explore, dream and discover, just really engaging with that sense of what we want to achieve. And now essentially is your time to make these decisions. So it's an exciting time in your life, a milestone and a monumental time. So thank you so much for participating. And if there's any chat, anything you want to ask at all, as we've said at the beginning, please feel free.
Carolyn, thank you so much for sharing that and giving that insight. It was definitely helpful. For those attending, just to let you know, the chat box has now opened, so please fire in some questions there. Carolyn, on what you were speaking about there, I have definitely personally flipped the lid a time or two in the past, but it's really interesting to hear that you can actually train and change your brain to deal with that. So that was really encouraging. And something else, a couple of things I picked up on. I had heard Carolyn speak before, and you spoke before about how it's hard to stay present when we're thinking about the past and the future. And something personally that I did, because not that I was a skeptic by any means, but certainly it was a brand new thing for me to hear Carolyn speak before. And when I go out on walks now, which we all do because it's the only thing we can do, I try to notice something different that I haven't noticed before. And like just small things, like I've noticed birds building nests in trees. I've noticed actually the same people in the same seats in the same parks at the same time. So it's just really interesting to be present as to what's going on. And that can help stop you focusing on the present, or sorry, on the future and the past, and stay present.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely thank you for that. Carolyn, just before we take any questions that people are asking,
yeah,
I am going to play a quick video because a lot of people here will be thinking about coming to university. And while coming to university, that can feel a wee bit overwhelming. But this video just showcases what some current students think about whenever they're coming to Queen's. So I'm just going to play a quick video.
Brilliant.
I felt very excited to come to Queen's in my first year. I chose Queen's because it was affordable. I have family living in Belfast, and I've been to Belfast before. I felt comfortable with living here.
So I was quite excited to sort of come back and get back amongst other students and actually doing work again.
I felt very excited to come to Queen's, both this year and last year. I think this year was definitely, I was a bit more apprehensive about coming to Queen's, but I was very excited to get out of my own house. I'm sure many people can relate to that. Living at home was an interesting experience for 6 months.
Coming back to Queen's after the whole summer I spent at home I was feeling a bit anxious and nervous and afraid I would not be able to see all of my friends here after such a long time. I was afraid I would end up spending all the time in my bedroom, having no one to talk to and like being able to see people only virtually. But in fact, the reality was that even though we can no longer go out for coffee or for breakfast or for lunch, we can still go and wander around Belfast. For example, we've been to the botanical gardens multiple times. We had coffee on the grass. We're still able to manage to find nice places to go to spend time together.
Initially, I was apprehensive about the differences in rules and regulations between where I came from, which was Dubai, and here in Northern Ireland. So that was obviously a major factor when I was coming back to Queen's, coming back to uni in September.
One really nice experience I had during this period, ever since I came back in September, was my birthday 3 weeks ago, when I was very afraid I might end up spending my birthday alone with no one by my side, but my friends somehow managed to surprise me and they all got me like nice gifts. Some of them even got me a birthday cake so that I have something to eat at midnight and not feel alone. And I felt like I was surrounded by love, even though they were not able to hug me and like express their love in a physical way.
I think I told someone only a few days ago that it's been quite an adventure and that it's been a good adventure at that.
So hopefully that gave you a bit of an insight of what it's like to come to Queen's for the first time. We've had a couple of questions come in here, Carolyn. The first one asks, where would you find good free guided meditations online?
Okay, super good question. I find the Oxford Mindfulness app particularly helpful. Mark Williams, there's a whole series of recorded meditations. There's a mixture of different facilitators in it, but the Mark Williams one in particular is very, very good. There's also a John Kabat-Zinn in particular. If you type him in and you look on YouTube, there's a series of different short talks as well on attitudes, which is very, very helpful too. And he also has a series of meditations there too. So Mark Williams or John Kabat-Zinn are very safe bets.
Great. Another question here. How long were you practicing mindful techniques before you personally started seeing a change in yourself?
Really good question as well. I actually started reading around mindfulness prior to being involved in it was a mindfulness-based stress reduction group. And I didn't see any changes whatsoever while I was reading about it. And much as I was very excited about the prospect of obviously seeing the changes that the neuroscientific evidence point towards, but while I was just reading about it, nothing happened. And while when I started practicing, for me personally now, I started to see changes within the first week. Simply because I was really being very deliberate about turning towards practice as a way of settling myself and settling my emotions. I had my deliberate practice in the morning and also was trying deliberately to practice at various intervals throughout the day. So it was probably quite an intense induction to it, and some people go into it more gradually. But the way my personality works is it's really you're in for your whole being in essence. So for me, it was very, very quickly. Other people who have taught in groups now, it takes a little longer to actually really feel the effects. But we do have to keep practicing for essentially about 3 months to we see that the practice is actually embedded in our lives, because it's all too easy to stop practicing and slip back into our normal coping strategies, which sometimes can be a little bit maladaptive.
And I would suggest that's like any practice that we choose to do in life. You do need to continue to work on it. It's not going to be a case you do it for 3 months and you feel better about yourself and that's it. You not got to continue with the processes, and they will continue to help. Another question here: how effective will mindfulness be for a person diagnosed with a mental condition like bipolar?
Another very good question, and what I would refer to here is the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, and what's actually recommended for depression and bipolar disorder is cognitive behavioral therapy. For mindfulness-based cognitive therapy is recommended for those who have had 3 or more relapses of depression. But for bipolar disorder, I've always looked towards the evidence base. And what we've experienced tonight, just to note as well, is just a small taster of mindfulness. It's not a program or nothing that's recommended by any evidence base in regards to the guidelines, because it takes a program as such, either mindfulness-based stress reduction or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So for bipolar disorder, that I would recommend cognitive behavioral therapy, simply because the guidelines say so.
Another question here, and it ties in with something that you spoke about, Carolyn, which I couldn't believe. 95% of our thoughts are the same as what we were thinking yesterday. I couldn't believe it when you said that. But this question is about, I have negative thoughts at times, and I want to face my fears, but I know I should face my fears, but I just struggle to do it. Have you ever experienced anything like that, where people know what they need to do, but they're just struggling to actually take that step forward and do it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a very common condition of procrastination, which
Yeah.
have suffered from. And sometimes it's even, and this is talking about very simple things, not anything too intense or anything too traumatic by any means. But when it comes to putting off, for example, doing a piece of work that we know will be a little tiresome or maybe a little boring or whatever it may be, and we keep on putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And essentially what the technique is involved in doing a very small part of the task, just a small baby step, and seeing how we go. Setting ourselves a manageable challenge to be able to face our fears, whatever that might be. Something, maybe it's even a simple fear of going somewhere, that maybe we think, oh my goodness, it's like a little bit of social anxiety, in a sense that just giving ourselves a very, very small challenge, a little baby step along the way, seeing how we feel, and then enlarging the step. And it's trying to be gentle and kind with ourselves, and remembering that it's not about deliberately by any means saying, right, you're going to do this, and it doesn't matter about how you, like if the emotions are overwhelming, but rather being very gradual, being very measured, and very conscious about the deliberate actions and challenges that we're actually presenting before ourselves. So baby steps is what I would recommend.
There doesn't seem to be any more questions in the chat box, Carla, but we have one final question, and it's for me. If you were a young person out there listening to this right now, and you're feeling worried or stressed or anxious about your future, what would be your one bit of advice for them?
My one bit of advice, if you're feeling anxious about your future, to settle in the present moment, to really enjoy the circumstances as they are right now, in the sense that being able to ensure that we anchor ourselves to the present moment through surrounding ourselves with people that we're connected to in the since that might be through Zoom or through the phone, whatever means, or our family, ensuring that we have the connection, practicing the 5 ways to well-being and connecting with other people, ensuring that we take our daily exercise, doing all those things that we know that keep us well in ourselves and our own being as such, is also important. That whenever we're feeling a little bit anxious, alongside evidently what's also recommended, the 5 ways to well-being, is taking notice, essentially mindfulness, and just resting into the unknown, in a sense that we all feel uncertainty, every one of us. And I remember the stage for myself whenever I was debating. I did my undergraduate, my master's and my doctorate all at Queen's. And it was something that I remember so well, feeling anxious at every single part of the process. So it's something that we all experience, and we need to learn how to manage. So just putting these coping strategies in place. And the one final thing I would say is remember to be gentle with yourself.
Super. Carolyn, thank you so much. I was about to say there, it's always a pleasure to share the stage with you, but it's always a pleasure to share the screen with you.
In the not too distant future, hopefully.
Hopefully. Listen, thank you so much, Carolyn. Thank you to everyone out there who have attended tonight. There's a couple of email addresses on the screen there. If you want to get in touch with Carolyn directly about anything to do with mindfulness, you can do so. If you want to get in touch with me about anything maybe more Queen's related, feel free to do so by going to the student recruitment email address there on screen. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Have a lovely evening, and hopefully see you all very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond, and thank you, everybody, for attending.